WFYI podcasts are brought to you by Bloomington, Indiana. Experience the holiday season by exploring unique downtown shops, experiencing local artisan markets, and enjoying one of the many seasonal performances. Plan a winter getaway and discover more holiday happenings at visitbloomington.com. WFYI podcasts are brought to you by Foster Success, helping to ensure older foster youth are safe, connected, and housed through the holiday season through their Friendsgiving campaign. More at fostersuccess.org.
We're going to take a trip right now. Like we always do about this time.
This is a journey into sound.
Break it down.
I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. On this week's show, I'll speak with Juan Díes, a Grammy-nominated musician, educator, and folklorist, best known as the co-founder and executive director of Sones de México Ensemble, Chicago's premier Mexican folk music collective. Under Juan's leadership, Sones de México has grown from a local cultural project into one of the nation's most respected folk ensembles, earning multiple award nominations, national touring engagements, and a reputation for both musical mastery and educational outreach. The music of Sones de México is rooted in cultural preservation and cross-cultural understanding. Juan has a special connection to Indiana. Before his rise as a cultural leader in Chicago, he spent his formative years in Indiana. Juan graduated from North Central High School in Indianapolis and studied at Earlham College and Indiana University.
Eventually, I formed a mariachi band at Indiana University. Possibly it was the first mariachi band at Indiana University. There were not very many Mexican students at the time.
Juan Díes will join me in a moment. But first, let's hear a classic track from Sones de México Ensemble. This is El Toro Rabón. That was Sones de México Ensemble with El Toro Rabón. And my guest this week is the group's co-founder and director, Juan Díes. Let's join our conversation. Juan, I'm a huge fan of your work. I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with our listeners here in Indiana.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kyle.
Yeah. You're known for your work with Sones de México, a brilliant folkloric group that explores many different styles of traditional Mexican music and sometimes reimagines them in exciting and creative new ways. We're going to talk about all that, but I wanted to focus a bit on your background, too. First of all, from what I know, you were born in upstate New York, but you were raised in San Luis Potosí, Mexico. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. My parents were going to school at Rochester when I was born, and we were back in Mexico before I was a year old. So from there until age 18, I lived in Mexico. I wasn't even that much aware that I had a U.S. birth certificate that was stuck away in the back of a drawer, and that was a pleasant discovery in my adulthood.
What was your introduction to music, making music? At what age did you get involved with music? And how did it enter your life?
Well, my family is always very inclined to the arts. There were no professional artists in the family or musicians, but there was art around the house. My mother was a visual artist, and my grandfather was a photographer. My grandparents were in the writing and literature, but my mother and my grandmother took on guitar lessons when I was 6 years old, mostly for therapeutical reasons. My grandmother had a tremor in her hand, and the doctor told her that she needed to exercise her hand either by squeezing a ball or learning to play guitar. So she chose the guitar. And apparently, according to my mother, I was riveted to the lessons, and I was just watching them through the lesson. So the teacher suggested that he could teach me for 5 minutes. At the end of the lesson, he would devote 5 minutes to me, and I quickly progressed. Even with that short lesson, I began to do all the exercises.
Juan, around age 18, I think, there was a big change in your life. I believe you were 18 when you moved to Indianapolis. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my father was in the medical field. He was a professor in med school in San Luis Potosí in Mexico, and he was offered a job as a researcher for Eli Lilly and Company in Indianapolis, whom he had worked for before for the Mexican branch office of the pharmaceutical company in Mexico. He had been the medical director down there, and they were trying to lure him back. So he accepted the job in 1982 and moved the whole family to Indianapolis. I was in the middle of high school in Mexico, even finishing up high school in Mexico. And when I arrived to the U.S. High school system, they figured that I would fit as a junior in high school, even though I was already 18 years old. But my English wasn't that good yet to have any chances of getting to college or anything. So they felt it was best for me to come in as a junior. So I did 2 years at North Central High School. And that was good because they had a very good music department there, and I had an opportunity to be introduced to formal theory classes and 4-part writing. I mean, they were pretty sophisticated for, compared to what high schools are today. They had a really good music department, and that gave me a leg up on the music side.
Roughly what year was it when your family moved to Indianapolis?
This was in 1982. And then I graduated in the class of 1984.
Was that exciting for you to come to Indianapolis? I mean, at that age, you probably had a lot of friends back home. Was it something you were dreading, or was it something that was exciting for you?
I was very excited because I was really into the American music. I really left all that traditional music from Mexico kind of behind me. I felt that it was something I already had in the bag, and I was really more interested in discovering new things.
Indianapolis was a very different place in the 1980s than it is today. Today, there's a really vibrant community of Latin American people, especially an incredible community of Mexican Americans who have developed a really strong music scene here. Was your family in contact with the local Mexican community at that time? I know there was the Hispano Center, which had a lot of activities at that time, or were you kind of isolated from all that?
Yeah, we were very isolated. To this day, I was not aware that there was a Hispanic organization. North Central High School had about 4,000 students at the time, and I don't remember running into any Spanish-speaking student at the school. I certainly was not in a class with any of them or in the lunchroom. I don't remember meeting anyone other than my brother that was running around the halls, my younger brother, that I could speak Spanish with. So in a way, it helped us learn English very quickly because we had nobody to speak Spanish with. But there was certainly not a Mexican community at North Central.
Juan, after you graduated from North Central, you moved to Richmond, Indiana, where you studied at Earlham College. Tell me about the move to Earlham and what you were studying there.
I was drawn to the Earlham College because it seemed that it was a very welcoming community. It's run by Quakers, and they call themselves Friends, and they really have that attitude towards people, even outside of their faith. I found it to be a very welcoming environment. All the professors went by their first name, and they have an international focus. I felt very comfortable there. And I started studying biology. Then I took a course on anthropology, cultural anthropology, which drew me because it sort of explained a lot of the things that I was grappling with as an immigrant of sorts, trying to compare my experience in Mexico to my new experience in the United States and trying to figure out, which way is better and trying to weigh things in. So anthropology really answered a lot of questions about living in, crossing cultural borders in a sense. And so I switched over to anthropology. In the meanwhile, I was taking music elective classes all the time. I joined the jazz band. I had an opportunity to take a radio show on vintage jazz in their one watt station, the WECI, and we had a lot of musical activities. At this time, I had still not returned to Mexican music. I was really exploring a lot of ragtime, finger picking. I was doing bluegrass. I was doing some. At this time, I had left my rock phase behind after high school, and I was through this radio show that I was doing on vintage jazz. I started getting into early jazz from the 1930s and so forth. Getting into that sort of Charlie Christian and Django Reinhardt and things like that, and some folk music, also some of this Travis Picking and Doc Watson and music like that.
Let's take a break from my conversation with Juan Díes and listen to another classic track from Sones de México Ensemble. This is La Morena.
Una morena me dijo que la llevara yo a ver.
Una morena me dijo que la llevara yo a ver.
A la reina de los cielos que la quería conocer.
A la reina de los cielos que la quería conocer.
Y después de haberla visto que la volviera a traer.
Y después de haberla visto que la volviera a traer.
Mi morena y mi morena.
Morenita, Dios adiós.
Y vuelvo a decir morena.
I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. We just heard Sones de México Ensemble with La Morena. And my guest this week is the group's co-founder and director, Juan Díes. Let's return to our conversation. I saw a notice from 1990 that you were presenting a concert of songs and stories from Mexico. Was that around the time, 1990, that you started to kind of embrace Mexican music in your performance? You mentioned you were playing ragtime, finger picking, Merle Travis, Doc Watson style music. When did you start kind of gravitating towards music from your homeland?
Yeah, very much so. It was around 1989, 1990 that I had. At this time, I was no longer at Earlham. I was at Indiana University, where at the Hoagie Carmichael room, we would have also a series of recitals. And I was beginning to, I was really returning to my Mexican roots. And I was doing a series on Mexican corridos, which is also an area of study in the Folklore Institute, where I was now becoming a folklorist and an ethnomusicologist as in graduate school. And a couple of my professors were interested in this subject matter. So it was a very well attended show that I did. Eventually, I formed a mariachi band at Indiana University. Possibly, it was the first mariachi band at Indiana University. And again, there were not very many Mexican students at the time. In 1990. So I recruited German trumpet player, an Irish fiddler. There was also an accordion player, guitarist. None of them were from Mexico, but they were all interested in the music. And at this time I knew enough music to be able to write all the scores. So I transcribed some arrangements, and I distributed, and we had rehearsals, and we started playing. At this time, I was already doing a little bit of gigging where we were being paid for our work as musicians. So I guess that's the beginnings of my professional life as a musician.
Did the mariachi have a name, the group?
Yes, we call it Los Coyotes.
Okay.
Coyotes, the Coyotes, which is it's a nickname for the people who helped sort of undocumented people cross the border, like through the illegally cross the border. So they're border crossers, and that kind of resonated with the subject matter of corridos, was their songs about outlaws and sort of folk heroes.
Yeah. When you mentioned your diverse interest in music as a young person, from British and American rock and roll to country, folk, and jazz, was there a particular point you can look back and remember where you decided that you kind of wanted to fully embrace the music traditions of your home and kind of make this a course of study for, you've been going strong at this for almost 50 years now, I think. It's been a pretty serious commitment. Do you remember a point where you kind of made that decision?
Yeah, like I said before, my initial interest, I was very curious about discovering new things. And my interest took me through all those genres that you mentioned. And while I was at Earlham, I had an opportunity to travel to East Africa, to Kenya, where I took it as a project to record the music of the Turkana people in the northern territories of Kenya, bordering with Sudan and Ethiopia. And I came back from Africa with a collection of over 100 songs that I had recorded. And I was really pumped with this. I wanted to become an Africanist. I was studying Swahili. And I entered graduate school with this intent of becoming an Africanist. And a lot of my professors were trying to talk me out of it. They said, well, you're not African. You don't speak the language. You may not have a future in this. Why don't you study Mexican music instead? And I got upset. I said, why? I mean, would you tell this to a white student who wants to study African music? Why are you telling me to, study my own music? I already know my music. I wanna discover something new. So I was kind of, I guess, a little bit defiant against their advice. But I remember very clearly that I was once at a reception, probably at the Archives of Traditional Music, in one of these performances. And I ran into this woman, a PhD student. I don't forget her name, but she was trying to make small talk with me. And she said, oh, I noticed you have an accent. Where are you from? And I said, I'm from Mexico. And she said, oh, that's great. I have a cousin in Santa Fe. And I went, Santa Fe? That's New Mexico. I said, do you even know where Mexico is? There's a country south of the United States called Mexico, and it's got over 100 million people, and so it like for 8 years since I had arrived in Indiana, I had been sort of superfluous. I had not realized how little people really knew about Mexico. I really had not been paying attention, and all of a sudden it dawned on me how little people knew about Mexico. And at first I got upset. I said, well, the Mexican government Mexico has so much business with the United States. It would be in their best interest for the government to send some, representatives, through the consulate or something, to educate the American public about Mexico, that it's not really a backwards country like the way you would see in a John Wayne movie, or in a kind of like desert scenes and Mexico is a modern country with like thriving culture and a lot of diversity. And then I realized, well, what would the qualifications for this emissary would be? It would be just like me, right? I would be the right person to fill that kind of job. So this became less about my curiosity and my interest it became an issue of like, how could I best serve the needs of our community at this point? I said, I think this would be the best use of my talents. And that's when I think it was an epiphany for me. I had that shift, and that's when I formed that mariachi band, and I started doing the corrido concerts at the Archives of Traditional Music. And I began to abandon, my resolve to become an Africanist and work further on this on that project that I had.
Cultural Manifesto will return with more words and music from Juan Díes after this short break.
WFYI podcasts are brought to you by Bloomington, Indiana. Experience the holiday season by exploring unique downtown shops, experiencing local artisan markets, and enjoying one of the many seasonal performances. Plan a winter getaway and discover more holiday happenings at visitbloomington.com.
I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. My guest this week is Juan Díes, a Grammy-nominated musician, educator, and folklorist, best known as the co-founder and executive director of Sones de México Ensemble. Let's return to my conversation with Juan as we discuss his work with Sones de México. I believe you started the group in 1994. Tell me about your move to Chicago and putting this group together and kind of what your vision was for this group.
One of my professors, who's passed away since, his name's Ronald Smith, he sat me down and he said, look, why don't you get an internship somewhere and see if you like the type of work that an ethnomusicologist does. And if you like it, then come back here and finish school as quickly as possible and go back to doing what you like. But if you don't like it, then definitely, get out of here as soon as possible and find what you like and find out what your calling is. So I saw an announcement in a folklore department for an internship position in Chicago at the Old Town School of Folk Music for a summer intern to do research on Guatemalan textiles within the city of Chicago and put together an exhibit. So I came to Chicago. I did that. I think I drove like 2,000 miles within the city, interviewing Guatemalan families, taking a look at their textiles that they had tucked away in the back of their closet, convincing them to lend them to us so we could include them in the exhibit. And not just the textiles, but also their stories that go along with their textiles. I was very proud of the work I did, and I returned to Indiana very pumped with this. I did, work for 3 more years to finish the degree, and I got a phone call from the Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago offering me a job as a director of community outreach for the school. This institution that was based on the American folk revival, Appalachian-based folk music, to diversify and bring in the equivalent roots music from the African American community, from the the various Latino communities, from the Asian community, from the Native American community. And I was very excited about this because I wasn't brought in as a token Latino. I was brought in as a multicultural expert. And this was a great first job for me. Incredible that I would find a job as an ethnomusicologist in the public sector, working towards something that would make a difference in this institution. So I worked there for 13 years. And in the meanwhile, I met the musicians, the founding members of Sones de México. Another thing I loved about Chicago is that there was a lot of Mexican people here. And I had not been around Mexican people for 8 years. No, more than 8 years. This is more like over 10 years. I had not been around that many Mexican people. So I gravitated. I found some musicians, very talented, that became the founding members of what is now Sones de México Ensemble.
The group has had a huge impact. I mean, you've been around for 31 years, I think. Not many groups make it that long. You were nominated for a Grammy. You've collaborated with legendary musicians, among many other significant accomplishments. What was your vision for the group when you founded it? And did you have any idea that this would have such an enduring presence?
Yeah, well, the group's vision was a combination of the founding members' goals. You know, what I brought in was this ethnomusicological approach, this interest in multiple cultures, this desire to have a community impact, all the politics of cultural representation. That's what I was bringing in. The music director, Victor Pichardo, was coming from Mexico City. He was a recent arrival in Chicago. He was interested in bringing Mexican son, which is the basis of this band. It's spelled S-O-N. And this is the roots music behind mariachi music, banda music. A lot of the popular music in Mexico is rooted in Mexican son, very much like American jazz and rock are rooted in Delta blues or Appalachian music. So we appealed to that root music. We specialized in this, and his interest was to elevate this music from being rural, archaic music to bring it to the main festival stages of in Chicago and beyond. So it was kind of a Mexican son on steroids. I guess the blues has a similar story when this Delta country blues arrived in Chicago and the musicians plugged in and electrified their instruments and became the Chicago blues. I mean, I think it's a parallel story with what happened to us.
Let's take a break from my conversation with Juan Díes and listen to music from Sones de México Ensemble. This is Zapateado.
Si un día tú oyeres decir que yo de estaré muerto, no lo dudes que sea cierto que ya no puedo vivir. Entonces oirás decir murió el rey de los amores. Me van a enterrar, no llores que ya voy a descansar. No te olvides de regar sobre de mi tumba flores.
That was Sones de México Ensemble with Zapateado. And my guest this week is the group's co-founder and director, Juan Díes. Let's return to our conversation. Juan, I wanted to ask you about one of my favorite recordings from the group, your 2007 album, Esta Tierra es Tuya. On this album, you do unique arrangements of the music of Bach and Led Zeppelin, arranging the music in a folkloric style. The title track is really powerful to me, which is a version of Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land, which you perform in both Spanish and English. Again, it's really powerful, especially in light of things that are happening politically today. Can you tell us a bit about how the idea came to kind of interpret this as like a norteño-style song with the accordion and present this classic Woody Guthrie song in this new way?
Yeah, so this song is an example of one thing I really like about Sones de México Ensemble, and that we are not preservationist in the sense that we are going to play this Mexican folk music as museum pieces and try to leave them as close to the old original recordings as possible, but that we would maintain the essence of them and not be shy about incorporating it into the context where we exist now, which is in the city of Chicago or in the U.S. We want to be able to talk to these multiple audiences, whether they're classical music audiences that are listening to Johann Sebastian Bach, or folk music audiences that are listening to Woody Guthrie, or the various other collaborations that we have with Chinese musicians, blues musicians, bluegrass musicians, etc. So the story behind This Land Is Your Land is I was driving to work one day at the Old Town School of Folk Music, and around the year of 2005, 2006, there were a series of protests in the Millennium Park in the downtown Chicago, related demanding immigration reform. All the way back then. And being in the halls of the Old Town School of Folk Music, where this song was not a rare occurrence, that song popped into my head. I remember, driving to work that day, and I began to hum and then put lyrics in Spanish to that song, and wondering what would this song sound like as a norteño. And I realized Woody Guthrie wrote this song as a protest song, almost as a parody of America the Beautiful, I guess, as a critique of American patriotism, which on one end was, celebrating the freedom of this country, and on the other end were discriminating people fleeing the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma, heading to California to look for opportunities. And people in California were telling these Okies to go back to their land and rejecting them. So this song was saying, well, this is our land, we're Americans. So it's a song about unity and about migrants. So I said this would translate as the same issue, we're dealing with immigrant people, some of them who've even had families on this side of the border before the border crossed them. So yeah, I had no idea. Musically speaking, this song is not as elaborate or sophisticated as some of the other recordings we've made. But I think from the point of view of a message, it's a political message, it really captivated people at that time, including some of the people at National Public Radio. We got covered by Weekend Edition first, and then Renee Montaigne from Morning Edition interviewed us about the song. I think it was the right song at the right time. And I think, I personally think that it had a lot to do with us getting a Grammy nomination.
This is Sones de México Ensemble with This Land Is Your Land.
Esta tierra es tuya, esta tierra es mía, desde el horizonte hasta la otra orilla, desde las montañas, costas, ríos y valles, la tierra es para ti y para mí. En el mundo vive una gente pobre y en el mundo vive otra gente rica y luego tenemos.
That was Sones de México Ensemble with This Land Is Your Land. Let's return to my conversation with the group's co-founder and director, Juan Díes. Juan, I did want to ask you a question about your work in ethnomusicology. I'm particularly interested in your study of corridos, a form of traditional narrative ballad that often tells the stories of folk heroes and outlaws. You've done some really interesting work in corrido music. I believe it was in 2015, you participated in a project with the U.S. Poet Laureate Juan Felipe Herrera to write a corrido about Sandra Bland, a Black woman who died in police custody in 2015. Tell me generally about your work in corridos.
Well, going back to my earliest memories, we spoke earlier about my beginnings in guitar when I was 6 years old, which puts us back in 1970. Some of those first songs that I was learning were corridos. In fact, corridos are narrative ballads that talk about folk heroes, tragic heroes. Typically, the hero of the song dies in the process of the narrative. It's almost like the equivalent of those Appalachian murder ballads. So yeah, it was a lifelong interest. And when I had this return in 1990 to my Mexican roots, since I didn't have a band yet, or I didn't have put together that mariachi band yet, I went back to the corridos. And my professors had taught me to look at these corridos really as works of literature, using the same tools that you would use to study, like, Shakespearean poetry. We fold them into the study of these other types of balladry. So it occurred to me when I arrived in Chicago at the Old Town School of Folk Music that I could begin teaching songwriting in corridos, and I could do it in English or in Spanish. I figured if you can teach people how to write haikus, Japanese haikus in English, why couldn't you write corridos in English too? So I began to do this as part of my outreach programs, and that's how it was born. Now we reached, I've done this in many places. I've probably facilitated the writing of hundreds of corridos, but this time the Library of Congress had invited Sones de Mexico to a concert, and the Juan Felipe Herrera, the poet laureate under the Obama administration, it was just being inducted the same weekend that we were performing, and he heard about us, and he invited us to the next room to share the corrido that we had just written in a workshop where he participated, and invited us to perform this corrido at his induction ceremony.
Voy a cantar un corrido de una mujer que murió. Sandra Bland se llamaba, dicen que se suicidó.
I'm going to sing a ballad about a woman who died. Her name was Sandra Bland. They say she committed suicide.
El día 10 de julio en Texas, ¿qué sucedió? Por no señalar la vuelta a la cárcel la llevó.
Juan, before we go, I did want to ask you about the present and future of Sones de Mexico. You've been performing with this group, as I mentioned, for over 30 years in Chicago. I'm sure there have been many ups and downs during those years. Right now, we're going through a very difficult time as a country. The Trump administration is slashing budgets for education and the arts and targeting museums and cultural institutions. In Chicago, the place where you live, we're seeing really an unprecedented assault on immigrants and the racial profiling of Latino people. Is there anything you want to say about how all of this is impacting you as a person or your work as an ethnomusicologist and musician in Chicago?
Yeah, I like to remind people that this folk music that we're playing is very old. Some of the oldest pieces that we play are probably over 500 years old. They come from like Aztec culture before the arrival with Europeans. And you can imagine how many crises our culture has gone through: colonialism, civil war, independence, economic crises here and there. And somehow this music has endured through all of these ups and downs. This is the case with folk music. Folk music never reaches the limelight. It's never, on the top 40, but it remains. It endures. Word of mouth. From in the oral tradition. So in the lifespan of Sones de Mexico, we had a big recession in the in 2009, 2010 that affected the whole U.S. economy. We had to adapt to that. We had the end of the distribution of albums and records. All of our CDs. People stopped buying CDs. The whole industry has changed to streaming technology. Then we had the pandemic, which we had 100% of our concerts for that year were canceled. So we've always found a way to come through. Right now we have a lot of challenges. We have budget cuts. There's threats on our community. There's a campaign of fear that a lot of people are responding to. So, we remind our followers that to don't give in to fear, and to have courage and resilience, and that we in the long run we're going to play the long game, and in the long game we will still be around. If we were around for 500 years, we'll still be around for a long time. This music is not fashion driven. This music endures.
Juan, one more question before we go. As you look back on your achievements in music and your career, where does Indiana fit into all that? I think you still have some family here. How did Indiana kind of shape what you've become as an artist?
Well, I got all my education in Indiana from the junior in high school through my graduate school. Both my brother and his family and both of my parents, thank God, are still around, living in Indiana. So it is kind of a home base of sorts, and I still have some friends back in Indiana. Yeah, that's what Indiana represents. I learned music theory. I learned a lot of all my musical styles. I had that radio show. I had all my core education in Indiana.
Juan, thank you for taking time to share some of your history with our listeners here in Indiana. And thank you for the incredible music and research you've dedicated your life to. I'm a huge fan, and it was a great honor to feature you on the program. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle.
That's all the time we have for this week. Thank you to my guest, Juan Díes, the co-founder and executive director of Sones de México Ensemble. If you appreciate the arts and culture programming you hear on this station, please consider making a donation now at WFYI.org/give. And check out the Cultural Manifesto podcast at WFYI.org or wherever you listen to podcasts. Cultural Manifesto is hosted and produced by me, Kyle Long. Thank you for listening.
WFYI podcasts are brought to you by Foster Success, helping to ensure older foster youth are safe, connected, and housed through the holiday season through their Friendsgiving campaign. More at fostersuccess.org.